The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio for Saturday, November 21st, 2015. Another week of planet Earth completely under siege from so many directions it's impossible to even quantify, from the spraying above our heads to the orchestrated events around the globe, all part of sucking the noose around our collective necks. I have a lot of ground to cover during this short time period, so please bear with me. This show has no commercials because we pay for it out of pocket to try to get some real news across. It's not broken up by commercials that completely distract from the message. I'll try to cover as much ground as I can. Question for all of us. Are you one of those that believes someone somewhere is keeping you safe? Someone somewhere is keeping an eye on the horizon for you so that you can indefinitely go on with your personal pursuits of pleasure and endless consumption? If that's what you think again. We're all being herded toward the cliff at blinding speed. The noose is being pulled around our collective necks. If you don't see this, you're in the dark. You're not examining the data. It's time to start investigating. What about the people of France? Do they still think nothing's wrong? That someone's watching out over them? Do they still think someone is keeping an eye on their welfare? Granted, such terrorist attacks can happen anywhere, anytime. I don't argue that. But let's look a little bit below the surface. The events in France are certainly horrible, as I mentioned, but who's really the core cause of these events? Who's really responsible for forming and funding ISIS? As I've previously discussed on other shows, our own government can very directly be connected to ISIS, to the ISIS juggernaut of insanity, in so many ways. From the photographs of John McCain taken with ISIS leaders. Look it up. Please don't believe anything I say on this program. Please look it up for yourself. John McCain on Fox News stating to Sean Hannity, I believe, that he was, quote, intimate with ISIS leaders. So why is ISIS doing what they're doing if John McCain's so intimate with them? Why isn't there some sort of communication going on or something to thwart what's happening? How about the ISIS Toyota trucks that we've already disclosed on this show that were funded by the Pentagon? What about the massive quantities of guns and ammunition also supplied by the U.S. and other powers? The same governments that claim to be fighting against ISIS now. The U.S. public needs to wake the hell up. Figure out what's really going on. The U.S. supports terrorism and brutal dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and ISIS and Al-Qaeda if it suits the U.S. quote-unquote interests. It's all about money and power. It always has been. It's all part of the overall agenda. All are needed to do some real investigation. Abandon unnecessary pursuits the American public is generally always engaged in. Do your part in the fight for the common good. Find out what's going on. It takes a lot more to say we support our troops and we love our children than just taking them to soccer games or putting a sticker on our bumper that says we support the troops. It takes a lot more than just those superficial things. And it starts with knowledge of knowing what's really going on around you and what you're really a part of. And that includes our military brothers and sisters who I certainly salute and who I stress that we have no chance as a population to salvage what's left of our planet and our life support systems without your help. We have no chance. We must have the U.S. military wake up and realize what they're being used for and join us. Where are people's priorities? Big question mark. Where are they? Especially with the American population. There are multiple hurdles that we must quickly overcome if we are to have any chance of delaying or preventing short-term total extinction of our species. And no matter how much certain people, most people, think that that's a ridiculous notion, you won't think that for long. You can quote me on that. You won't think that that's a ridiculous statement for much longer. The public must not only be awakened, but must then be compelled to accept that they are part of the whole, that they have a responsibility toward the greater good. Most importantly, the public must understand that almost nothing they have been told by so-called elected officials and mainstream media is true. The lies are so immense and so prolific that we live in an illusion that's shattering around us by the day. On that note, very briefly, what important headlines has mainstream media given us this week, besides, of course, the attacks in France? A few headlines from mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. Second biggest diamond ever found. Not that that's very important at this stage of the game. Rapper takes credit for coach's firing. Another important news bite while the world implodes around us. Is this a real-life lightsaber? I'm not sure what bearing that has on the bigger picture. And finally, worst shot of NBA season. Sports. Nero fiddles while Rome burns. How much sports is invading our consciousness while literally the planet's imploding? Weather report for California. Again, not much rain in Northern California. We're less than a third of normal rainfall in spite of the strongest El Nino ever recorded. Less than 1/3 of the rainfall. The climate engineers can migrate the rain across California as long as they want. They can turn the spigot on whenever they want. They can flood or drought whomever they want. They decide how toxic the rain is or isn't. If you don't believe climate engineering is going on, you either haven't investigated, you're totally in denial, or you're clinically blind. People have to look up. Look up the term geoengineering. Look up the term solar radiation management, and look at the sky and tell me this is not going on. It's absolutely going on, and we have a mountain of documents to prove it. We have film footage to prove it. We have lab tests to prove it. We have patents to prove it. Look at the data. The longer you stay in denial, the less chance any of us have. The rest of the country, we have the engineered snowstorms happening again. This is why we have weather whiplash. This is why we have 80 degrees one day and snow the next. In some cases, like Amarillo, Texas, May 1st, 2013, 100 degrees, all-time record, snowed the next day. How does it go from 100 degrees to snow in one day? It's called geoengineering and chemical ice nucleation. If you don't believe this is going on, look it up. Look up the patents. Look around you. Start to remember what the weather used to be like. The rest of the world, not looking too good either. We have weather cataclysms increasing everywhere, weather whiplash increasing everywhere. Everywhere we get reports from, and we have about 30,000 visitors a day at geoengineeringwatch.org. I get reports from all over the globe. The spraying is absolutely horrific. Very few people see a blue sky anymore because there isn't much of a blue sky anymore. And by the way, for those people that have chosen to believe the fossil fuel-funded think tanks, all those in the military-industrial complex and the geoengineering arena whose job it is to make you believe the planet is cooling with engineered snowstorms, just a fun fact. October 2015, the warmest month ever recorded on planet Earth since record keeping began. Look it up. Please don't believe me. We've just passed the 368th or 369th consecutive month of above normal temperatures on planet Earth. 2015 will be a record-shattering year, breaking last year's record-shattering year, and 2016 likely to be warmer still. Important for people to understand this so that we are standing on a credible platform of accurate data, and it's important for people to understand this even more so. Climate engineering is helping to fuel that fire. They can create short-term cool downs at the cost of a worsened overall warming and a completely contaminated planet. We're already there. Planet's already contaminated. No going back at this point. All we can do is salvage what's left. What we face is not just climate change, it's an abrupt climate shift. If you don't believe me, you will. Wait and see. It's important to understand this. So many people ask, who's funding all of this? Who's funding the wars? Who's behind all the carnage? Central bankers run the world. Period. I want to go through a bit of a chronology here so people understand some of the chain of events that have gotten us to the very, very dark corner that we're all in at this point. Rothschilds, Warburgs, Rockefellers, Morgans, these are the people who have set up the current paradigm and who run it. I don't care if you don't believe me. It's a historical fact. We look at these families and these groups that set up the quote-unquote Federal Reserve. There's nothing federal about it. It's private bankers who print whatever they want. Let's have a quote from President Woodrow Wilson, who said this after the Federal Reserve was set up. Quote from President Wilson, "I'm a most unhappy man. I've unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all of our activities are in the hands of a few men." I just named those men. There's others, of course, now, but those are cores. "We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Again, Woodrow Wilson. That's the reality we have. People need to understand the dark cancer that is tearing apart our planet and civilization goes back a very long way. The banker-controlled U.S. government has always done everything possible to ensure there would be global conflict. Such conflicts are very profitable. They help to ensure and strengthen that control by a few men. For World War I, the Lusitania was discussed by some of these bankers and insiders, this is historical record, as being used for a false flag, a way to galvanize the American population and get them into the war. The Lusitania was sailed into waters controlled by German U-boats in spite of the knowledge that that ship would likely be sunk. And the German government even tried to post notices when they knew the Lusitania was going to voyage there, not to press on with that voyage. But they did it anyway. What happened? The ship was sank, it was torpedoed, it was carrying ammunition, which blew the ship to bits, torpedoed, and we were into World War I. Now let's go to World War II. The U.S.-controlled, or banker-controlled U.S. government did everything possible to ensure that Japan would attack the U.S. This is historical fact. They cut off supply lines, they sanctioned, they did everything they could to ensure that Japan would attack the U.S. because they needed to galvanize the American population to support that war. None of this means that Hitler wasn't what he was, a tyrant. It doesn't take away from any of those events. It simply means there was a deeper agenda. And when we look at those events also, let's remember this. Historical fact as well. Look it up. Prescott Bush, Granddad Bush, was part of the banking institution that funded the Third Reich. Look it up. There were congressional hearings in the 40s that finally shut down that funding that was orchestrated by Prescott Bush. So again, look below the surface. So in World War II, we see the same thing happening again. The banker-controlled U.S. government making sure that Japan would attack the U.S. to galvanize the U.S. population into supporting World War II. They knew the attack on Pearl Harbor was coming. They did everything they could to make sure it happened and to maximize their utilization of that event. What about Vietnam? The Gulf of Tonkin? Same thing. Over and over and over. Why don't people know this? They certainly don't teach this sort of thing in school. That's why the government's taking control of the educational system, to make sure that none of this is taught. So what about Vietnam? The Gulf of Tonkin incident, the very premise for the U.S. entering the war, never happened. This is not speculation. It's indisputed historical fact. Almost 60,000 of our sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers died in that war. And what about the innocent people of Vietnam? Almost 3 million people in Vietnam died. In fact, they're still dying today from the continued contamination effects from Agent Orange, unexploded bomb ordnance, etc., massive birth defects happening in Vietnam. We entered that war under false premises. Secretary McNamara himself admitted to the false flag event in Vietnam. It's on the record. Our military leaders made sure that Vietnam War would be long, drawn out, And it's important to remember that this war was for profit. It was never meant to be won. The more military ordnance that was used and destroyed in that war, the more profit the bankers make. Period. Between Vietnam and 9/11, a great many countries around the world were invaded and occupied by the banker-controlled U.S. military. In fact, in the last 70 plus years, about 50 countries have been invaded and occupied by the U.S. military. Again, I want to say for our military brothers and sisters, I know you're in the military. I believe you're in the military for the right reasons, the vast majority of you. A lot of great people in the military. But if you simply follow orders and you forget your oath to protect your country and your countrymen by all threats, foreign and domestic, then you've missed the point. You've missed the point, period. You need to wake up and look at what's happening around you. As mentioned in previous shows, Global Elite Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, that's a tough name to say, so forgive me, his strategy for the Middle East, the grand chessboard, which I've talked about before, and you can look this up. This is not some fringe information. Please look it up. That was his plan for the global elite, for the U.S., to take over control of the Middle East by destabilizing and toppling nations. I've gone over this before. I'm following through this outline of dot to dot to dot, the use of the military, the processes that are used to try to create these conflicts for the benefit of the bankers and the consolidation of global power. So the grand chessboard to destabilize the Middle Eastern nations, that's exactly what has been done. And by the way, climate engineering was a major factor used, again, in that destabilization. Every one of the Middle Eastern countries that is now in chaos was subjected to record drought before being toppled. What's happening in California now? They won't let it rain here. Are we the next target? Anybody who thinks our government is here for the common good, and I hear from people who think this, why would they do this? Why wouldn't they just make it rain? That's someone who's living under the delusion that their government is here for their benefit, that their government is here for the common good. That couldn't be further from the truth. Governments are like mafia families. That's all they are. And when there's not enough to go around, they're going to start fighting more. Although they're still cooperating, by the way. We know that. Especially with the climate engineering issue. We have collaboration between all the major powers. So as much as you might think this country's better than that country, they're all cooperating. They're all spraying you. We're breathing it. Period. It's killing everything. But Brzezinski's grand chessboard, the toppling of the nations in the Middle East, I'm going through these conflict after conflict, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, all false flags, many in between, smaller conflicts. But as we head toward 9/11, as previously discussed, the 9/11 event, the license for the U.S. and other Western powers to invade, destabilize, and occupy nations. It's all about controlling the countries with the remaining resources and securing those resources. Without 9/11, the U.S. population would have never been galvanized and would have never supported what has gone on overseas. And how often is that 9/11 card played even today? Anybody who thinks that's not a false flag event needs to look at the facts. Anybody who still believes the official, utterly ridiculous and completely impossible 9/11 official narrative, look at the facts. I challenge you, go to Rethink 9/11 and see what 2,300 architects and engineers have to say. They're inarguable data from some of the world's top architects and engineers. Indisputable proof. We just held a viewing of the 9/11 Architects and Engineers documentary in Reading on November 14th. 90% of the people that attended had never seen anything but the official story on 9/11. After viewing the evidence presented in this hour and 20-minute documentary, I don't think anybody at that meeting left with any doubts at all that the official story was completely and utterly preposterous, impossible, and ridiculous. And when people really see the evidence, they are very taken back at how they could have ever believed the official story to begin with. How they could have believed that, for example, Building 7, the third building to come down, 47-story steel structure, high-rise, that we're told collapsed in 7 seconds from some furniture burning in the first floor. Ridiculous. And there's much more data. Again, if you care about the truth, I don't want to go into the 9/11 issue anymore. It's an extremely important issue, but I have a lot more ground to cover. But if you really care about the truth, if you really care about your children's future, your country's future, and your brothers and sisters in the military, you have a responsibility to look for the truth, to investigate the truth, and not believe what you saw on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. The complete propaganda that is exactly what those outlets, those media spin machines are meant to put out. And too many people take the bait, unfortunately. So, in regard to what's shaping up now, we've had, again, all these events leading to world conflict. We've had the 9/11 issue that has been the license to invade and destabilize these Middle Eastern countries. What's happened in these countries? The infrastructure was bombed. And nations like Iraq, who had nothing to do with 9/11, that again, as I stated earlier, as quoted by General Wesley Clark, who saw the plan less than a week after 9/11 that was already laid out to invade Iraq, even though Iraq had nothing to do with anything. It's about all the reasons I've already outlined. So our country and others in the so-called coalition bomb and destroy the infrastructure of these nations, most recently Syria. That has to create a tidal wave of refugees. It has to. When these people can't survive in their own country because of what we have done to that country, even if that country didn't directly do anything to us, there has to be refugees. But that's part of the plan. Part of the U.S.-created ISIS threat, which is now being played for all it's worth. Yes, the French attacks were tragic. There's no question about that. Yes, the people that are part of ISIS are barbarians, no question about that. But who spawned those groups? Who has funded them? Who has armed them? And who has created the refugee crisis as a platform by which these groups can then enter the country? Who's done that? Who's behind it? Just like Al-Qaeda. Who spawned Al-Qaeda initially? Look at your history. And about those people killed in France, again, which was a tragedy, I would ask this as well. Are the lives of those who die in Middle Eastern countries from drone attacks, innocent people killed by our drones, in some cases 40 and 50 innocents at a time, wedding parties bombed by our drones, doesn't that fuel ISIS's ability to recruit people? How would you feel if a wedding party in the United States was bombed by a drone from Iraq or Iran? How would you feel? Ask yourself that question. And are their lives any less valuable than our lives? We don't see any coverage when 70, 80, 100 people die in Iraq from what we've done there. We don't see any coverage of that. Maybe a little blip, that's it. How hypocritical can we be? And when Fox News, and this just happened on Thursday, I saw on Fox News on Thursday the 19th of November, John Bolton, who's always on Fox News, John Bolton, former assistant to the Secretary of State, who was the death squad leader in Central America, who led and orchestrated death squads to secure U.S. interests in Central American countries. Who the hell is John Bolton to claim any sort of moral high ground when he has done what he has done? And this is who Fox News puts on TV. And I'm not singling out Fox. CNN is just as bad with Anderson Cooper, a former CIA stooge, and Wolf Blitzer, former AIPAC lobbyist. This is all theater. It's all theater top to bottom, total hypocrisy, feeding out total propaganda that's being scarfed up by the American population again. Again. Wake up. Wake up. This is all theater. I don't care what political party we're talking about. It's all very well orchestrated theater and very convincing to the American population so that they take this side or that side, or they hate Obama or they hate Bush, and they're all infighting and not looking at what's happening around them, above them, and below them. We're being shoved off a cliff right now for the final round. What we face now is not like any other time. The environment's imploding. Economic system is imploding. It can't not implode. It can't not implode. When the environment no longer produces, the economy's done. It's over. I don't care how much money you print. The walls are closing in. The chess pieces are being maneuvered. ISIS is part of that. The France incident is part of that. Now they're drumming it up here in the U.S. with people like John Bolton and Fox and all the things we saw, just like before the second Iraq War, all the completely false information being spewed out again, and the American population not paying attention again. Everyone needs to wake up. And as I saw on Fox this evening again, everything is Iran's fault. ISIS is Iran's fault, is what John Bolton was claiming. Well, that simply doesn't fit history. Doesn't fit history at all. We know, as I just outlined, who really is most responsible for spawning ISIS. So, when we know ISIS was the creation of Western powers, as was Al-Qaeda, and fueling the hatred of U.S. and foreign lands is also part of the agenda. Again, when they bomb wedding parties and they bomb hospitals, as we know, a UN hospital was just bombed recently, or Doctors Without Borders, I think, was bombed. That fuels the hatred, that helps ISIS recruit, that plays into the refugee crisis, that plays into the terrorism agenda that's being used to strip rights like it's being stripped in France right now. For the next 90 days, apparently, anyone in France can have their door kicked in without a warrant. That's coming for all of us. It's coming for all of us. Know that. They're heading there quickly because they can't hide what's unfolding much longer, specifically with the biosphere as well. I'll get to that in a minute, just how bad the biosphere is, and some radical news of ocean die-off that's happening now at an absolutely frightening pace. So, are we really to believe, I want to drive this point home again, are we really to believe that the Toyota truck-driving army of ISIS can't be easily obliterated by any major powers that have air forces, by the way? ISIS doesn't have an air force. But we're supposed to believe that they're such a formidable power in their Toyota trucks with their very shoddily mounted cannons in the back that make the truck rock every direction as if they could fire an accurate shot like that. We're supposed to believe that they're so formidable that now we have three major air forces, France, U.S., actually four, I think UK might be contributing, or about to contribute, but we have three anyway, France, U.S., Russia, that they can't just completely erase ISIS from the face of the earth. How are we supposed to believe that they can't do that? The same as we're supposed to believe that a diabetic Arab from a cave in Afghanistan somehow outwitted the most powerful military on the globe on 9/11. Same kind of ridiculous story. We shouldn't believe any longer. So now, one more comparison with the ISIS theater that's being fanned up right now, and to compare that with the Iraqi army that we were told was so formidable. The Iraqi army that, by the way, that was lured into Kuwait. A lot of history there, and I know that history. They were lured into Kuwait, told by our ambassador that the U.S. would not interfere if they went into Kuwait, and then they were slaughtered on the way out. A lot of this army that didn't even have shoes, that we were led to believe was so formidable, they were completely obliterated. It was an absolute shooting fish in a barrel fiasco. They were slaughtered. And a lot of those Iraqi men were there because they were told if they didn't fight, their families would be hurt. I'm sure that's probably true. Why would we slaughter those men who didn't even want to fight to begin with? There's so much more to these stories, so much more that we are not being told. Again, I want to stress this because the question comes up so often. Who is funding all this? Who's behind all the tyranny and evil? Private bankers have long since ruled the world. That shouldn't be a surprise to so many people, and I'm asked this all the time. On the climate engineering programs, to the wars of naked aggression to pursue resources, all these roads lead back to the central bankers. They control countries, and thus they control militaries around the world. It all goes back to the money. Economic collapses also since the Great Depression were completely orchestrated in a further attempt to consolidate their power, the central bankers. The gold standard was abolished in 1933, so there would be no underlying value to the dollar, and thus the central bankers could print whatever they wanted. And that's exactly what they've done. A lot of people, again, ask, what about our tax dollars? And are we paying for all these wars? Are we paying for the spraying? It's simply a way to mire people in struggle, the taxes. I'm not saying if we had a military that was doing the right thing and we had a legitimate economic structure and a government system, that we shouldn't pay taxes. Of course, under those circumstances, we should. We should. And I pay mine. But is that what's really paying for these programs? No, because they can print whatever they want. The Pentagon cannot account for over $8 trillion since the mid-90s. $8 trillion. And that's just what we know about. So again, it's important for people to understand what the federal banking system is. It's private bankers that can print whatever they want. And the whole economic system has been run on debt. And now that system is collapsing. It is collapsing. I went over the Baltic Dry Index last week. It's even further in the hole right now. That's all global dry shipping. It's skidding to a halt. How long can they hide that? When the environment's not producing again, economic collapse is inevitable and close. The bankers are the force behind all world conflicts, and most smaller ones. Again, the bankers wanted World War I, World War II, Vietnam. We see who has made the money off 9/11, who has made the money off 9/11 and all the arms sales that have occurred. The military-industrial complex. These dots aren't hard to connect. That's who's behind so much of what's happening. Doesn't mean we don't have extremism in the world. We do. I'm not denying that. But to look at what's being spewed out on our mainstream TV and our corporate media at this point, and the fans they're trying to, or the fires they're trying to, the fan, I should say, with this sort of mindset, preparing the people of the U.S. now for some inevitable terror attack, which something's going to come. Something's coming, because they can't hide what's happening on the bigger picture. They can't hide the fact that the climate is disintegrating, ecosystems are disintegrating, crops are failing. Can't hide that for very long. Can't hide it for very long. So they'll play some big cards. Some big shoes will drop soon. France is just the beginning. The only counterbalancing chance we have is the American population, which would then reach the American military. We can't turn the direction that we're going, which leads to certain extinction, without the American population waking up and the American military waking up. Those honorable brothers and sisters in the military. There's a lot of corrupt people in the military too, no question. Anybody who denies that is not looking at reality. And the corruption at the top is total. It's absolutely total. So many have sold their soul, for lack of a better word. And they try to justify their behavior by multiple different means, but the bottom line is this juggernaut of insanity has to be stopped. And it's not just the U.S. military. Again, there's collaboration between all the major militaries. Although Russia is done some things in the Middle East that are a little more rational than our country has done, don't think for a minute that those countries aren't corrupt either. They are. They absolutely are. It's all a matter of scale at this point. For those that are rolling their eyes at all these facts, I ask you to remember this. Do you remember Kennedy's speech on the dangers posed by the secret societies? Do you remember that? Have you ever listened to it? How many have listened to that 5-minute speech, which you can find online? Do you ever wonder why Kennedy was killed shortly after that speech? And that the records from the assassination are still sealed and secret even today? As the saying goes, again, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. Kennedy was an honorable man, and he was killed for it. Those in denial will soon be forced to face reality as the biosphere implodes and industrialized civilization follows, as I have stated. The sooner people wake up and look at the facts and face what's unfolding and join in the fight for the common good, the more we may have left to salvage of our planet and our lives. Denial won't save you. In fact, denial will ensure our common demise. Absolutely ensure it. On the theme of collapse, I want to point out another aspect of decimation caused by the U.S. military to our own country and our own homeland. The world's oceans are collapsing now. Though there are many contributing factors, many. Let's examine for a moment the catastrophic dive along the U.S. West Coast and the U.S. military's part in that collapse. The U.S. Navy has requested a permit from the U.S. Department of Commerce and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Marine Fisheries Service to, quote, take marine mammals in their Northwest training and testing area between 2015 and 2020. These areas include, but are not limited to, Northern California, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. Now, if the military will do this on our own soil, in our own oceans and our own waters off our own coast, what do they do in other countries? How catastrophic is that? I've tried to outline that. This train is completely off the rails. Let me continue with this report. The National Marine Fisheries has received a request from the U.S. Navy for authorization to, quote, take marine mammals incidental to the training and testing activities conducted in the Northwest Training Testing Study Area. Pursuant to the Marine Mammal Protection Act, is requesting comments on its proposal and regulations to subsequent letters of authorization to the Navy. These programs are already going on, and the marine mammals are dying everywhere. I'll get to that in a moment. Description of this specified activity. The Navy is requesting authorization to take marine mammals conducted in the testing activities. The Navy has determined that sonar use and underwater detonations are the stressors most likely to impact marine mammals, which could rise to the level of, quote, harassment. Well, when you kill something, I guess you could call it harassment. Detailed descriptions of the U.S. Navy activities are provided for your information. This can be found online. Now, exactly what's happening in the Pacific Northwest, along the coast of California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Alaska, everything is dying. Everything is dying. Those who aren't aware of this, you'll be aware soon enough. Whales washing up on the coastlines. We have thousands of seal deaths, thousands. The birds are dying off. The fish populations have imploded. We have unprecedented algae blooms. Now, how does this happen? We talk about, most people point straightly at Fukushima, again, for all the die-off. They blame everything on Fukushima, but that's really not the whole picture. Not at all. Fukushima is a massive problem, as I've stated in previous shows. No known technology to cure Fukushima, to deal with Fukushima. It may kill us all, and yet we have 60 more nuclear plants on the boards. We have to be built. We have about 400 facilities already operating on the planet. Nuclear power may kill all life on Earth before other things can. We'll have to wait and see. But all these issues, as I stated, are all connected. They're all connected. So the die-off along the coast, the Fukushima contamination is not the whole picture. Geoengineering is a major part of the picture. As I've stated before, the climate modification programs have shredded the ozone layer. Those who feel the sun is hot on their skin, it's because it is. As I've stated before, massive UV. That UV kills plankton. As the plankton populations implode, the bottom of the food chain drops out. We have what appears to have been a very aggressive attempt by the geoengineers to suppress El Nino for as long as they could, with hugely destructive consequences. They're trying to hide the degree of warming that's happening on our planet at the cost of making it far worse, cataclysmically worse. It was bad already. So now we have a massively hot Pacific Ocean that's creating massive algae blooms, that's causing seabed gassing of methane and hydrogen sulfide that deoxygenates the water, creates hypoxic and anoxic zones that kill fish. Now, on top of that, we have everything I just went over. We have the U.S. Navy treating the coastlines and our waters as some sort of toxic practice zone. And they're using depleted uranium ammunition on top of their sonar that obliterates marine mammals. They're using radioactive depleted uranium ammunition for practice, and I know this because I spoke to the Navy's PR person 5 years ago. She didn't sound too educated on the situation. She was just a face and a voice that they put on the phone. But she made it clear to me that, yes, they were using depleted uranium ammunition for practice, and she didn't think it was anything to be concerned about. Well, wouldn't we be concerned when the Navy's using ammunition off the coast, off any coast, but in this case our coast, that has a radioactive half-life of 4.5 billion years? 4.5 billion with a B? Permanently contaminating our waters? For practice? For any purpose is wrong, but for practice? It's no wonder that the coastlines are littered with dead whales now. I challenge anybody listening to this broadcast, get on your computer and search Pacific Coast dead whales and see what you see. Under images. Look under images, not just under web search, but search that title under images and see what you see. You will be shocked. I mean shocked to the core. These massive creatures with brains bigger than us, washing up dead everywhere. There has not been a surviving orca whale birthed in the last 3 years. And the adults, formerly healthy adults, are all dying. They're washed up on the beaches. We have an implosion of the terrestrial life web as well. As I've stated in previous shows, from the whales to the insects in Northern California, the terrestrial and aquatic insect populations have declined 90% in 10 years. So from the smallest creatures to the largest, everything is dying. How long do we think we'll be here when that's the case? And we're not hitting the brakes, we're hitting the accelerator. Absolutely hitting the accelerator. I heard an analogy, I think from David Suzuki, not that I like David Suzuki, who completely denies geoengineering, but he made an analogy that's accurate in this case. He said the human race is like the occupants of a car that's speeding off a cliff, and all they can do is argue about what seat they get. That's about what it's like. We're through the guardrail, as I've stated again. There's no turning around. There's no reset button in this case. The human race has not just shot itself in the foot. It has shot itself in the head over and over and continues to do so. And unless we, the public, wake up and get involved and help wake up our military brothers and sisters and their families and get them on our side, unless that's done, we have no chance. The only potential to turn the direction of this ship is with the help, with the assistance, with the cooperation of the U.S. military. We must have enough of them wake up, and some of them are waking up. As I've stated before, again, I do communicate fairly frequently with a retired Air Force general who's trying as hard as he can to wake others up. There are great people in the military, and they've been misled along with the rest of us. It's time for everybody to wake up. We don't have any time to spare. As far as what the U.S. has done to other countries around the globe with depleted uranium, again, this ammunition not only is used off our coast, but it's been used in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq. And the decimation it's caused there is astounding. In fact, Gulf War syndrome, for those that don't remember, Gulf War syndrome, about 200,000 of our troops sickened permanently in many cases from this exposure. Deformed children all over in Iraq. Some of the pictures are absolutely horrifying. The birth defects have shot up 10,000%. It's staggering. And this is what our military does. Why do they use depleted uranium, many might ask? Because it's a very effective projectile. Heaviest metal on the planet, cuts right through steel armor. Very effective as long as you don't plan on living on the planet for long, because it contaminates everything, everywhere it's used, forever. 4.5 billion year half-life. So we've used it in Iraq. We've used it for practice off our coasts, apparently still being used. Everything's dying off our coast. And again, the die-off is a combination of multiple factors. Extreme warming related to geoengineering, shredded ozone later, dying plankton. Fukushima radiation is a part of the equation, but only a part. But I would estimate right now, many of the military operations, if we include climate engineering, are the biggest part of that die-off by far. What about smaller places that we'd never hear of? One more example of the permanent destruction caused by the U.S. military. U.S. Navy to be sued for depleted uranium use on Caribbean island. The inhabitants of the Puerto Rican island, this report continues, this is a tough one, Viquez, I'm pronouncing that wrong, but bear with me, are to take the United States Navy to court for compensation over a claim. This is an older report, but I want to point out something that our media hasn't told us, over its use of depleted uranium shells, which has caused cancer at an epidemic level. Depleted uranium is a highly toxic byproduct of the enriched uranium for the production of nuclear weapons and reactor fuel. That's where they get the depleted uranium. By the way, just like evidence seems to indicate that toxic coal fly ash, a waste byproduct, is quite possibly a base material that's being used in the aerosol spraying operations over our heads, contaminating everything. Where did the depleted uranium come from? Same sort of mentality. Some genius at the Pentagon figured out how to get rid of the toxic byproduct of uranium enrichment. Let's just use it for ammunition and scatter it everywhere. The solution to pollution is dilution, according to these people. So we see the same sort of model, don't we? Fly ash matches the chemical signature of what we see, or what we're testing on, what's coming down on us, that Dr. Marvin Herndon has quite accurately exposed, I believe, in this case. Certainly other elements mixed in with this base material, but it looks like it may be a base material. That's one way you get rid of the coal fly ash. How do you get rid of the depleted uranium? Use it for ammunition. Just use it for ammunition. And that's exactly what they've done. So on this small island in the Caribbean, over a third of the island's population of 9,000, over a third are now suffering from a range of cancers and other serious illnesses. By official figures, the cases of cancer of the breast, cervix, and uterus have risen by 300% over the last 20 years. Doctors have linked the alarming rise in cancers to the decades-long use of the island as a bombing range by the U.S. Navy, and to a lesser extent by Britain's Navy. Part of the same cabal, no question. So, what do we have in summary? We have a planet that's now been irreparably damaged. We're all out on the end of the plank in uncharted territory. Earth's biosystems are collapsing. We have a push toward another global conflict with the same sort of model of propaganda we've seen over and over and over again. And we have an American population that's still asleep at the wheel. We need to change that immediately, and that will take all of us to help raise consciousness till we reach critical mass. It has to be done, and we don't have much time. As I've stated so many other times, when the gravity of our common situation can no longer be hidden from the masses, the power structure will be more dangerous than ever. And we're already sliding down that slope. We're there. Trouble's not on the horizon. It's kicking in the door. We're sliding down the slope of a power structure that's extremely dangerous because it won't be able to hide what it's done for much longer, or the severity of what all of us face. By obliterating the infrastructure of numerous Middle Eastern countries, again, the Western powers have guaranteed a migrant crisis. They're playing this to their full advantage. Again, by spawning, funding, and arming groups like ISIS, the global power structure has put another piece into the puzzle of their agenda. Those in power and the media they control will make the most of what they've created. Count on it. Absolutely count on it. If you watch corporate media right now, they are conditioning us for whatever's coming next. It's not hard to see if you simply understand the connection of the dots that brought us to this point. Corporate mainstream media will sow and fertilize fear in the population. That's exactly what they're doing. When you watch these corporate media shows, again, run by the likes of former CIA employee Anderson Cooper and former AIPAC lobbyist Wolf Blitzer and people on Fox News like former Central American Death Squad manager John Bolton. These are the people that are putting out conditioning to prepare the U.S. population, to condition them for what's coming, for whatever they have planned for all of us. So many agendas are being carried out at once. All is connected, from the spraying that's happening above our heads to all the other issues I've described. And I want to remind everyone, remember this. I've been over this before, but this is very important. As the walls close in, as the noose pulls around our collective necks, as the power structure runs out of cards to play and they're backed into a corner with things they can't hide much longer from a population that's going to panic once they know, remember this. Homeland security agencies have purchased over 2 billion rounds of 40 caliber hollow point ammunition. 2 billion with a B. Look it up. In the last 3 years. This ammunition is not even legal for wartime use. Our government has also taken GPS readings of all of our homes. All of us. As I stated before, they hiked into my remote forest location twice. They wanted to make sure they had me, apparently. Hiked in twice, almost a mile behind a lock gate, to GPS my front door. Every last one of us has been GPSed in the 2010 census, and they wouldn't say why, because I tried. I tried to reach the Census Bureau, could not get a straight answer, because they don't have a straight answer. Now, let's consider that they're setting up drone bases all over the U.S., no question about that. That's happening. Let's consider the Constitution has been altered. The posse comitatus has been eliminated to allow the U.S. military to operate on U.S. soil. Americans need to wake up and pay attention. Our problems are not going away. The military-industrial complex of total, out-of-control insanity needs to be exposed completely. We need desperately for our military brothers and sisters, again, to wake up to this fact. As I stated earlier, military personnel has taken an oath to protect their country and its citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. None of the data I've covered here in this dissemination is conspiracy, it's fact. Easily verified for those that actually want the truth. And if you don't go looking for the truth, you're certainly not going to find it. If you continue to feed from the trough of corporate media, propaganda, that's what you'll base your opinions on. And those opinions are leading us all to a place of no return. Those that have bought into the lies, bought into the illusions, we need to wake up as fast as possible. And again, when you understand and look at the simple historical chain of events that our country has supported, any brutal dictatorship like Bahrain, like Saudi Arabia, that has towed the line for those in power, those brutal dictatorships are allowed to exist. If we have any dictator that doesn't toe the line, like Saddam Hussein, who wanted to disconnect from the dollar, the global reserve currency of the dollar that allows this juggernaut of insanity to exist, he had to be taken out. Same with Gaddafi, same with Iran, same with Syria, all wanted to disconnect from the dollar. That couldn't be allowed. So there's many more aspects than what the very simplistic programming that's put out by mainstream media. As dark as the horizon looks, so many people obviously ask and want to know, what do we do? What can they do? What can any of us do? Each of us can do a lot if we simply try. You have to get up off the bench. You have to try. You have to make every day count. You have to make yourself immune to the resistance you get from family and friends that don't want to face the truth, and that's the majority of people. They don't want to face the truth. They'll have to soon. Understand that. There's no hiding from the truth much longer. Heads will be ripped out of the sand very soon. But when you encounter that kind of resistance, simply plant a seed and move on. Pass on credible data. If you see a copy of an article that shows that, in fact, the U.S. government was behind some of the ISIS spawning, and we have people like Ken O'Keefe, by the way, I'm really impressed with former U.S. Marine Ken O'Keefe, who speaks very directly to the truth. Print something out from Ken O'Keefe, from a U.S. military man, stating the facts about the formation of ISIS being from our own government. Give people credible information to go on. Don't just rant at them. Same thing with the spraying. Don't point at the sky. Don't run out the street and point at the sky and start ranting. That doesn't convince people of the factual basis of what you're trying to share. Give them credible data. Print our flyers off geoengineeringwatch.org. You can download them and print them for free, or download them for free rather, and print them locally. They're not expensive if you go to the right location. Have credible data to pass on to others. That's a much better key to the door than just pointing and ranting. And understand this. Any one of us, anyone listening to this program right now again, could be the final grain of sand to tilt the scale that helps us to reach critical mass. Any one of us could be that person if you simply try to move the ball forward. It doesn't take many degrees of change of course to end up in a completely different place. And we need to change course. The current course leads to certain near-term extinction. Know that. That's a mathematical fact. So remember this equation as well. If anyone listening helps to share credible data with 2 people on the first day of a 30-day month, and those 2 with 2 people each on the second day of a 30-day month, and so on for 30 days, That's 5.5 million at the end of 30 days. We can all make a difference. Make every day count. Know that the sand in the hourglass is running out. Time is not on our side. Make your voice heard. This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Until next week, thank you.